landing from over the pole, flying in a big airliner, chicken flying everywhere around the plane. Could we ever feel much finer coming into Los Angeles, bringing in a couple of keys? Don't touch my bags if you please, Mr. Customs Man. Yeah, there's a guy with a ticket to Mexico. No, we couldn't look much.
Okay.
Hello, Arlo. How are you today?
So far, so good. Not too bad.
Very good. This is an interview of you as part of the Greystone Psychiatric Hospital Oral History Project, and you'll be sharing your memories of your visits up to your dad. I believe he was a patient at Greystone from approximately the years of 1956 to 61.
Yeah.
And today is March 20th, 2022. My name is Stephanie Kippen. I'm the founder of the Oral History Project. So I believe your dad was in there from 56 to 61. So I did the numbers, and you were born in 47, correct?
Yeah. So I was about 9 years old, 8 or 9, when I first went to visit Greystone.
Okay. And it was kind of a long trip, wasn't it? Were you living in Brooklyn then, or Queens?
We had just moved. It was a sort of tumultuous time. And we had moved from Brooklyn to Queens in around, I would say, 1954. So we had a home in Queens, in Howard Beach, and it took us about an hour and a half to get to Greystone from there. But for us, it was kind of an adventure. My mother had a late mid-50s Studebaker, and she would pile us 3 kids in the back seat, and she would drive us to Greystone from Howard Beach, where we were living at the time.
How long did that trip take?
Took about an hour and a half to get there. I don't really remember, but it was something like that.
Did she bring food along?
Did she do what?
Did your mother bring food along?
I don't, you know what? I don't know. I think we had some kind of snacks that she would pack up. It was sort of like a...
Okay, go ahead. Okay, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway,
So,
my mother considered that trip to be important for Woody's sons and daughter to get a chance to meet him as they grew up, and for her to inform us as to what little she knew at the time, and as to what he was doing there, what disease he was dealing with. And we didn't know in the early days. In the mid-50s, 1956, nobody had mentioned Huntington's disease. And it wasn't really until maybe 3 or 4 years later that we began to deal with what limited sort of understanding we could have as kids as to what he was dealing with, and that it was hereditary, and that we might be affected with it at some point. So my mother delicately fed us the information as much as she thought we could deal with at the time. But those trips to and from Greystone were kind of an adventure. I mean, it was great. We would sit in the car, we would listen to music, and my mother, had us invent games that we would play, like who was the composer, it was classical music, who was the conductor. If we were really good, we would know all that stuff. And little by little, it became an educational adventure just to get there and back. Never mind the fact that we had got there and what we encountered when we did.
So when you arrived there, do you remember what you saw? I mean, Johanna Romney said she remembered it looking a little ominous when she and Bob Dylan showed up there, the outside of the physical plant.
Well, my father was in the main building, which was this kind of, I mean, it was imposing. It was, especially for little kids. I mean, I think it was meant to be imposing. The architecture of it, the grand entry to it, a tree-lined boulevard with grass and well-kept lawns. It was meant to be imposing, and it certainly was. So from the very first day we got there, which I don't really remember exactly, I can't, at 9 years old, it's hard to go back in time and remember the first and second or third time you experienced something, but I remember being impressed with the nature of the architecture of the facility. It was big. It was bigger than anything I had seen.
Yes, it was. People always say it was larger than the footprint of the Pentagon. Did you go up to Ward 40 where your father was located to see him there? Or did you, I know you also went outside, but did you spend any time in Ward 40?
Well, I did later in as the years passed, because at 9 years old, I wasn't allowed in the building. You had to be over a certain age, I think like 13 or something like that. And so it was in the latter part of his time there that I was allowed to go inside. And what really struck me, aside from the nature of the architecture itself, like I've been saying, was the smell of whatever they were using to clean up or whatever. It had a powerful impact on me that I didn't really experience until decades later, when I had gone into the wards of hospitals and county homes and places like that back in the 80s, when people were dealing with AIDS, and it was a tough time. And the first thing I thought to myself was, oh my God, I remember this smell. So it wasn't the visuals, it was the sense of being there and the smell of it. It was, I wouldn't say it was industrial, but it definitely was chemical. And that, the smell of the stuff they were using to clean, I guess, or the odors of all of the people warehoused there, all combined to have an impact on me. I think you got used to it if you were inside, but just going from the outside into the building, it was like passing through a barrier where the first thing that got you was the smell.
How was the noise?
I don't remember it being very noisy. I'm sure the clatter of feet in moving utilities created some sound, so it wasn't dead quiet. But when you entered the main part of the building, it was sort of like going into a hotel lobby or an airport or something like that.
How do you think your father adjusted to being there, especially because that was a psychiatric hospital? He really wasn't probably very similar to his cohorts in the ward.
Well, there were two kinds of patients at Greystone that I knew of. One was voluntary and one was committed. So you could be put there either by the state or by people or family or whatever. And my father was not among those. He was not a committed patient. He was a voluntary patient, which meant theoretically that he could leave anytime. As he had walked in, he could walk out. But he put himself there because he knew that something was wrong and figured that it had to be some kind of psychiatric mental disorder because it wasn't making rational sense to him what he was feeling. He couldn't relate at the time because the limited knowledge that everybody had, not just him, was that the disease that had taken his mother's life, and her life ended in an insane asylum in Norman, Oklahoma. That disease could not be passed from mother to son, according to what was understood at the time. And so he dismissed that, although he must have somewhere in his gut said, wait a minute, this is familiar. I know what I'm dealing with. It doesn't make any sense. According to science, this shouldn't be happening to me. So I think he was wanting to find out what it was that was wrong with him and if they could do anything about it.
Did he ever play his guitar? I think he had it there, didn't he?
I don't know if he had one there, although it would make sense to me. I never saw him play a guitar that he had there. I did bring a little guitar that he had bought me for my 5th birthday. I brought it, I took it everywhere. So it was available to him when we went to visit, which was mostly, I would say, when the weather was decent. In other words, we didn't really go see, we didn't sit outside in the inclement weather. We would go during the spring, summer, early fall. But it was around that same time, 1950s, early mid-50s, that we began going away for the summers. We went to a camp up in the Adirondacks, and so I didn't see him. I would communicate through letters because all of the young campers had to write a letter home or to somewhere at least once a week. And the counselors would make sure that you were, writing a note. Most of my letters were typical, I would say, kid type notes. Hi, Woody, how you doing? I'm fine, bye. Stuff like that. We weren't philosophizing or talking about the weather or any of that stuff. I was too young. So out of a mandatory sort of postal system that I was required to participate in, I would write to my father. And I don't remember, I got a few responses from him over the years, not at the camps, but at the house. And I still have some of those letters.
Very nice. Did he encourage you during that period to use the guitar he'd given you at age 5? And did he ever ask you to play for him?
Well, I'm sure I played for him whether he asked or not, because I was playing music continuously since I can remember. So even before the age of 5, I was playing the harmonica and goofing off and jumping around. And I think my father got a kick out of it. And I knew early on that it would please him, that it made him feel happy. And it made me feel great. So whether he didn't encourage me in the sense that he didn't need to. I was playing anyway for my own pleasure, and I had no inkling or no idea at the time that I would end up doing it as a profession. For me, playing guitar and music was just like eating or walking, or I mean, it just came naturally to me, and I love doing it. So I would bring the guitar, and my brother and my sister and I would mostly be playing with each other at these visits. We left my mother and father alone so that they could talk without sitting there wondering what they were talking about, or without trying to figure that out. There was a tree there that we called the magic tree, and it was sort of magical in the sense that it was like a weeping birch, no, a weeping cherry. There were two of them out in front of the Greystone main building, and the bark was smooth, and they would spread out laterally so that you could climb into this thing and all around it without getting hurt too much or scraped up or whatever. We would play in that thing while my mother and father sat down and talked. So I was not privy to the conversations. I didn't go to hear them. I went there because my mom insisted that we participate in this sort of extended family that my father had sort of, he had become. My mother had remarried at the time, but my biological father was, at least in my memory, still dad. He was still daddy to me. And so I would go there just to see him and to be around him and to play and goof off and have fun and yell and scream and, you know, play tag and do all the things kids did, while the older folks, my mom and dad, would sit down and just chat.
So it sounds like you had some very nice memories of visits to Greystone.
I don't ever recall having bad memories of going to visit my father. I thought they were a little odd, but only in the sense that I knew that most kids on the street that I grew up, well, their fathers were home and they went to work and stuff like that, and came back for dinner. And but ours was a little different. My father was in a hospital somewhere, about an hour and a half away. And so that became part of our difference, you might say. And it was a little nuts, a little crazy, but it really wasn't a big deal. We just took it in stride. That's who we were.
He then was relocated to Brooklyn or Queens? Which of the two boroughs?
He was in Kings County Hospital.
Okay.
Which I think was in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was at, what was the name of the other one there?
Was it Creedmoor?
Creedmoor, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he was at Creedmoor too. So there were, and there might have been one other, I'm not exactly sure, but I think those were the three places that I remember visiting him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And each place had different rules and regulations. And as I aged over the years, I had more access to him. That was significant for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when he passed?
Well, he died in 1967 and I was born in 47. So I was 20 years
20.
old when died.
Okay, okay. Well, we're going to wrap up this conversation. Any further thoughts you'd like to pass along about your dad in Greystone, your relationship with him, anything else you'd like to just have as your parting words?
I think that our visits to Greystone are indelible, at least in my mind. I think they are probably with my brother and with my sister as well, although it may mean different things to them, and changed them in ways that are different than the way it changed me. Any experience that you have as a child is going to affect you in the long run. And in the long run of things, I don't have any memories that are adverse. I remember going there. The trips themselves was family time when we would sit there without distractions from other people or other things. And I looked forward to going. After a while, my father would be taken out of the hospital for a few hours. We didn't just visit him there, but it was too long a trip to make to bring him home until later on in life when we did that. But we would go visit him when he was, there were some people nearby called the Gleasons, and we would go visit my dad at the Gleasons' house because my mother recognized that it was difficult for him, for my father, to communicate. And any further stress on that was just causing him to some problems. I mean, if you can't say what's on your mind, if you can't tell somebody when you want to go somewhere or something like that, or something to do, it's stressful. And so in order to relieve that stress, my mother limited the amount of people who would go see him. There were a lot of people that wanted to go. And she would say, no, this is family time. Doesn't mean that they didn't visit him other times, but the weekends at least were for us.
At the Gleasons, I know Bob Dylan came by a few times. Did any of his other professional colleagues join you there?
Yeah, I'm sure they did, but I don't remember who.
Okay.
Because it was so long ago now. I only have a couple of images that are split seconds. I mean, they're not even a second worth of memory. Under hypnosis or something, maybe I could figure it out, but
not necessary.
Right.
Okay, well, you've really given us a wonderful, comprehensive idea of your father's time there, your family's relationship. I think your mother, many people have said this, was just really a remarkable person, keeping the family together, keeping his legacy going, and also to really promote research into Huntington's chorea. So
Yeah.
I would say you were very lucky or blessed, shall we say, to be part of such a wonderful family, siblings and parents.
Okay.
So
Take it
thank
easy.
you so much
Nice
for
chat.
your time.
Okay.